Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Mike Ames Recruitment Show, where we are going to be talking about how to get clients in America the easy way. We have someone on today who's going to talk about how UK recruitment companies can target and win American clients, because there are differences, aren't there, Michael?
Oh, many, many differences, more than you might imagine, actually. So I'm very looking forward to kind of drilling into that with Clark, because we've all three of us, well, Clark is American, so he has American clients, but as you would do. But obviously, you've got American clients, and so have I. So we're gonna have a good old rap about that, I think, aren't we?
We are. We're very excited today, and of course, the differences have never been so more paramount after the football, which I think is showing a fair few differences.
Yeah, the football. We can still talk about the football. We can still talk about the football until tomorrow evening, and then we may not need to be able to talk about it after that.
No. I'm a jinx, so I won't watch. I can't watch the football because I think I'm a jinx, and so
stay away from it then, pet. So
yeah,
anyway.
so I've not watched a single England match so far, nothing. So I refuse to admit it exists. Anyway,
why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about this? Right? Why are we talking about my birthday tomorrow? Why aren't we talking about that?
Because I'm assuming it's because you're only 43 and it's not a big birthday.
Yeah, 44 tomorrow. Right. So let me tell you why we're talking about this. It's really important, right? So the American economy is growing at a pace. It's massive. I wouldn't say it's superheated, but it's growing a lot. And that's continued for many years. It looks like that's going to continue. It doesn't seem to be abating in any way, shape, or form. The UK economy, not so good. The European economy is not so good. Everything's a little flat over here. So there is opportunity, because when an economy grows, clearly they're going to need to hire people. So there's a space for UK recruiters. So there's a lot of benefits with UK companies targeting American companies to place people there. So we need to explore this properly. We need you to come away from today, a lot more clarity on what you need to do and how you need to do it if you want to target into the States. So, yes, yeah, Alan, there he is, look.
Yeah, no. Sorry. For those of you who don't watch, Alan's mentioned, can I stop watching the Wolves play? Because we are Wolverhampton Wanderers supporters, and I cannot work miracles. Okay, Alan, I cannot work miracles.
Yeah, okay. Next season, though, him and Eth will be there. All right.
Right, okay. So, Mike, can we talk a little bit about our guest today and why we've got him on to talk about this?
Yeah, because Clark is an expert in the field, right? His business, I'm going to introduce him properly in a minute, but his business is focused on go-to-market. That's what he does. And he operates a lot in America because that's where he's based and that's what he is. So, excuse me. So what I wanted to do is draw in his expertise and try and draw out the differences more than anything else, because I think there's an assumption if you're going to go and do whatever it is that you do in a new market is going to be the same as the existing market. And that ain't the case, unfortunately. So we need to draw out those differences. You need to be aware of them. Only got 45 minutes, so I think we should crack on, Kurs. What do you reckon?
And without further ado, I will bring Clark in. Hello, Clark. Welcome.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. How we doing?
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, let me introduce Clark. So Clark is the founder and CEO of a consultancy called Digital Recruiter. And the big focus of that business is LinkedIn. It's sales, it's marketing with a bit of an AI spin, a bit of do's and don'ts around AI, and also go-to-market workflows. So quite a lot there to talk about and quite a lot to bring into today. So hopefully that introduced you well enough there, Clark.
Oh, it's fantastic. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Right. Without further ado, Clark, I want to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of it. I want to talk about the cultural differences between the US and UK, because although we share a common language, there are quite a lot of differences. And I imagine even within the coasts of America and sort of the middle as well. So can we talk a little bit about what you think the main differences are selling to a UK versus the US?
Well, I can speak on... Yes. First of all, we should talk about it. That's why we're here. So we are going to talk about it. But what I have seen, having done this I started on LinkedIn in 2020. So I started at Aerotech, big staffing, kind of selling in Southern California, Los Angeles, like skilled trades, light industrial. So kind of my background came from really trying to understand. I think the first thing is there's consultative selling and there's transactional selling, which right. Everyone on here knows what I mean by that. Right? That's not a new term, but I think that's one of the first segments you have to understand is there's really two different types of hiring managers and companies in the States. And there's people that really care about consultative selling, and there's people that more just like, hey, go find me someone. And I think that's probably going to be most people. But I think when I've spoken to recruiters in the UK the last few years, it seems like for me, the UK is just, there's agencies just sitting on top of each other and the fees are too low. And it's just like a scramble and trying to do everything you can to kind of get those fees and those placements. And the competition is so fierce. Where in the US, a lot of the market, I think UK recruiters are surprised. A lot of the US market sometimes doesn't even know what agency recruiting is. And I think that's changed a lot the last few years, but the buyer is just, you have to meet them at a different level. And you just, a lot of times they need a lot more education around it, or they have a misconception over what agency recruiting is and where it could be beneficial. And so coming into it, I think a lot of UK recruiters feel like they kind of have to, prove themselves and what they've done and everything else, and all that stuff can be important, but it's actually a lot more about meeting the managers where they're at versus trying to have to like prove that you should be selling into the market, because the managers don't frankly care where you are as long as you can get them the right person. There's a lot more emphasis on that piece of it, which again, I know sounds obvious, but I do think like in terms of something like content and everything else, I have noticed it's a little bit harder sometimes for UK recruiters to grasp to that piece of content marketing, but also just like being a little bit more raw and authentic and kind of putting yourself out there a little bit more. Like Mike and you and I were talking about, like Americans are just like kind of open and just like throw it out there, and you either take it or leave it. That works extremely well.
At that point, can we just dive into that? But there's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to look at content and all sorts later because it's really important. I think the first thing to say, which I've noticed dealing with Americans, we've got quite a few American clients now, is that we speak American, but they don't speak English in the same way. I know that sounds condescending, and it's not meant to be. I remember once I was on a cruise. I've got to tell you this story. I was on a cruise, Viking cruise, full of Americans and a few English people. Sitting on the top deck, we were sailing on the river. An American lady came up to me and just started talking to me and said, what do you think, or whatever. I can't remember. So, and I answered her in English, as you do. And she looked at me and she said, "Do you speak English?" And I said, wrongly, because I know she was embarrassed, I said, like a native, because it's where I was born. But the fact is, I spoke in English and she didn't understand me. We understand a lot of American accents because we watch American TV. So we know the difference between a Bronx accent or a Georgia, Alabama accent or a Californian accent. We understand that. We know how that works. And so we just easily understand things that are said to us. In America, particularly those people that don't bother to watch UK TV programs, and who does, they don't necessarily understand you. So you have to slow down. You have to speak clearly, slow down, and you have to learn some of the American words, some of the English words that we use. We would, of the obvious ones, like we say vacation, we don't say holiday because it's a different thing in the States. We don't say CV or profile. We say resume because that's the American word for it. So you have to learn the language and you have to learn to communicate in American, and don't take for granted that they're going to understand a damn word that you say. But also don't take the piss if they get it wrong and say, yes, I speak English like a native because that's where I was born. That was a mistake and I wish I hadn't said that.
And it's a great line. It's a great line. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like it goes back to meeting kind of people where they're at, and that's what you got to kind of do. And that's what you got to do in marketing in general. But I think culturally, that's what it is. And I think what I've seen is either I've talked to UK recruiters that fight that, or they embrace it. And that's like, it's your choice, right? But if you want to kind of land and have the impact here, you just gotta know the battlefield, right? You're going into. And it's just,
you do. And I think it's important because there is a tendency to just slip into what you know, but actually you have to make the conversion in the same way that if you went to Spain, you try and speak a few Spanish words. But I think it's important to do that. The other thing to talk about is sense of humor, because in many cases, the American sense of humor is not quite the same as ours. The way in which we indulge in banter when we know someone a little better Obviously, not when you're making the first outreaches, you wouldn't. Keep it nice and professional. But when you get to know someone a little better. And when we had people here, we had some Americans stay with us earlier in the year. Not lovely people, but some of the things that I said, they didn't get at all. You could tell. It's like, you don't know what I just said. And in the end, I just said, look, if I do anything, just say I don't know what you're on about, and I'll straighten it out for you. But sense of humor is a classic one. And you were that case, didn't you, Kirsty, with that?
Yeah, American? One of my best friends in the whole world, she's from NorCal originally, North California. And we met at a yoga retreat and we were really good friends. And then after we left the yoga retreat, we kept phone calls, and I go and see her periodically. But when we first started doing it, I was having what I would class as just classic, average, low-level banter. And she said to me, Kirsty, why are you being mean to me? And I was like, oh my God, I'm not at all. And I had to explain that in a British culture, teasing people is part of, it's an affectionate thing, but it's not, it doesn't seem to quite cross the Atlantic in the same way. And so you have to sort of restrain and be aware of when you get to that more friendly level with clients, particularly, and you are starting to move into the more personal zone, that senses of humor could be seen as either offensive or slightly mean, or it's just not quite the same. Do you feel that that's right, Clark?
Yeah, I think it leans more in the US to more self-deprecating humor versus teasing the other person is typically what I see. Now there's an argument of how but you also can't be too self-deprecating, like it's a weird kind of balance, it's a weird thing. But I agree. I mean, I grew up in New England, and amongst boys, I mean, teasing was our default setting, right? And all that stuff. But in different parts of the country, that's just not it at all. And I would say California has obviously many stereotypes about it, and some of them can be generally kind of true. It's definitely a little bit, my mom was from there. She did not like the teasing and all the other stuff, and all that. Like, and for me, that's kind of what I grew up with. So even in the geography, I think understanding U.S. is a pretty large place, and again, no surprise, but even from the World Cup, people have been figuring out, like, going, I think of the Scottish fans going to Boston and then going to Miami, right? Like it's just like the wildly different experiences they had there. I mean, you do have to understand, like, it's a lot of, hey, where do you live now? Where do you come from? You kind of want to know that when you're figuring out. It kind of gives you an idea.
Can I ask you a question on this?
Who you're dealing with?
Clark, can I ask you a question? I know there's no necessarily right or wrong answer, but based on what you just said there, if people are going to strike out in the States, do you think it's a good idea to pick an area, not necessarily a state, but an area, and say, right, I'm going to really get into that area and know the people and know the culture and know how they see things, and not just think, America, great, 49 states, let's go for it, or whatever it is.
Go to Boston and LA and,
we'll do
Texas,
this,
all in one go.
Do you think it's better to kind of really zero in on a geographical location?
I think the first rule of thumb is always evaluate your strengths and lean into that. I say that to give, like, the actual answer. What would be, it depends. However, it depends on the recruiter and what are your kind of natural, skills, abilities. Do you have a specific, like, market mastery that you have? Is it construction? Is it accounting and finance? Or it could be a blend of those two, which I have one client that does that. And so I think sometimes it could be easier, depending on your speed to market and getting acquainted and building your confidence and your trust in the market, to pick a geographical location. And I've had a UK client this year. She picked construction, accounting, and finance in a certain geographical area in the States, and she just honed in on that from her LinkedIn profile, from her marketing, from her content, from where it allowed her to go visit people in person, right? And, like, stick to one area versus having to fly all over the country. So there are some benefits to doing that. I don't think you necessarily have to have success. It depends on kind of the market you're recruiting and the skill sets and how in demand it is. But I think it allowed her to focus and really to go in.
Last question, Mike, and then we're moving on.
I know we need to press on, but it's important. You mentioned about your client actually visited the States, and I've known several UK recruiters, tend to be higher ticket recruiters, but they do have a tendency to go to the States at least once, usually twice a year, and actually press the flesh and go and meet people. They're not just at the end of a Teams call or on the telephone. Do you think that's just them, or do you think that's an important characteristic of dealing with Americans?
I think it's super important. I think, because if you haven't dealt with us in general, come hang out, come visit, come see what it's like, experience it for yourself. I mean, when I grew up in recruiting, and you did as well, Mike, what do we do? In-person meetings all day, every day. I mean, this wasn't even a thing. I think Skype was around, and I can never forget how to really use it properly with the internet connection. So like, it was just, it's all in-person meetings, and there's nothing. I'm as huge an advocate as LinkedIn as anyone, especially for agency recruiters, but there is nothing that beats the in-person piece of it. So imagine meeting in person, and then, then them seeing you consistently on LinkedIn. I think that combination is huge. And then you get the kind of the feeling, the energy, you have the experience, and you could say you've been here too. And I think from a relatability standpoint, it goes a long way.
Perfect. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so in a second, as we've mentioned a couple of times, we are going to talk more about kind of marketing ourselves. But before then, I want to talk about sort of the prep things that we need to do, because we need to find potential targets in the US from across the pond. And to do that, I'm assuming LinkedIn is going to be a big focus for that. Is there anything that we need to do ourselves to make sure that online we look good for when we're kind of trying to start conversations, which again, we're going to start and look at in a second? Is there anything that we need to prep to find potential targets?
The first thing we do with our clients is, what business do you want more of? This is the one question I ask them. And it sounds, again, probably pretty elementary, but it really honing in. And if you find your answer, it goes on for about 5 minutes, right? The answer should really be with about 30 seconds. Like, you should have an idea of the types of clients that you want more of, and then focus in on that. And then just give yourself a clear lane. I think not picking too much on your LinkedIn profile and how you post and everything else, not trying to necessarily be everything, but really honing in on what you've done really well, and connecting with a little bit of your story about kind of how you got here. Because there's no entry fee to be a recruiter, right? So you're always dealing with that kind of like, well, who are you? Like, where'd you come from? Like, why'd you decide to be in recruiting? Like, what ended up here? So you want to have a clear lane, and then be able to quickly connect to them of like why you're doing this, right? And why they should talk to you. And then you start there, then you can look at the companies, the titles. Are they posted jobs? Have they reposted jobs? Right? Like, all, what other, intent signals do they have, and stuff like that. But I think just starting with that clear lane and connecting this is what I want to go after, and this is why it makes sense for them to want to talk to me, I think is the starting point. And then you have a million tactics, right, to find people, and there's all the tools and AI and everything else now, and automation and content. But I think starting with that gives a clear roadmap. You can change it up at any time, but I would say stick with something and stick with it for at least 6 months. And it's going to take a little bit, depending on how newer you are to that space. But give yourself time for the relationship and the trust to build.
We had someone on, an American on recently in the show, our friend Charles Causey, and he's a EOR in the States.
Oh, I love Charles. Yeah.
Yeah, you know Charles, right? So this episode is kind of like a complementary episode to what Charles did. But one of the things he said was, focus is a really good idea, as you said, to be known as the person who does this, as opposed to known as the person, well, the question is this, but the answer is always yes. So it's actually about that focus that makes a penetration. Once you're in, yeah, then you can expand a little bit, but it's that focus. So you think that's really important at the beginning when you first turn up there?
Focus is super important, because also what focus does, and I've seen it over and over again, is it can give you confidence. And confidence is what US buyers really resonate with. As if you watch on, it's I think kind of one of the things that, I think what stereotypes where people maybe have it by US. You guys are overly confident and think you're amazing at everything. It's like, yes, we do. Whether we are or not, who knows, right? But it's like we also respect that bravado, that confidence, that kind of going out and just like doing the thing. Now, there's, as we see on the internet, there's like an overdoing of that's cheesy and inauthentic and all that stuff. And I think there's a time where that probably worked better than others. I don't think that's working as well. I think authentic confidence is working extremely well right now for what it's seen across the board. I think that is like, and that's what a focus allows, I think, is one of the benefits of like having that focus. Like I've talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of recruiters by now this decade. I have a lot of confidence from having that focus of working with that market, right, than I did say 6 years ago. And so I think it's an earned thing.
You're saying that you really got to take your best game to the States. You know, whatever you're best at in the UK, you can do lots of things, but I'm really good at this thing. I'm going to go and find a market in the States then for this and be known as the go-to guy or the go-to girl for that particular thing. And then
it's the first thing I would look at for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the UK, we call that a micro niche. So it's a niche within a niche, and the smaller the niche, normally the easier it is to penetrate with it. So that's really good to know.
Amazing. Okay, so in a second, I want to talk to you about content, because obviously being across the pond, you can't, dropping in to people is a bit harder, so we have to be present online. But before then, Mike, I do believe that it is time for our sponsored message, which is it's still us. We're still sponsored.
Yeah. We're the greatest sponsors we've ever had. Actually, with the apartment of Giant, they were pretty good sponsors as well. Okay, put me up, Kirst. Right, so here we go. Right, so Kirsty runs workshops. So if you'd like a live podcast just like this one, that all the benefits that it brings, which by the way are significant. I can't tell you how much a live podcast will help in BD. It's our single biggest source of clients, not just now, but what it seems to do is build up layer by layer. I picked up a client just the week before I went on holiday, said, I've been watching your stuff for ages, and now's the right time for me. It really does bring across your personality. You can interact with people. There's a whole bunch of things. So what Kirsty's workshop does is teach people how to run your own live podcast show, just like this one. So we're going to show you how to choose a compelling topic, because we have topics each time. Obviously, how do you do that, which is important. If your topic doesn't work, no one will come. The structure of the show, or what they call it, the format of your show. How to invite guests, which is really important, because as Clark is showing today, I don't know very much about trading in the States. Clark knows everything, so that's why he's our guest. How to get lots of attendees, which we're very good at, actually. And then how to use it as a sales tool, and that's really important. Just doing a show on its own and keeping your fingers crossed isn't enough. You actually actively use it to generate sales. So it's 1 hour online workshop. It's free of charge. We don't charge for it. There are no sales pitches. Doesn't work like that. If you're interested, you come to us. If you're not, then that's just fine. It's actually tomorrow, the next one that we have, and we won't do another one now until the autumn. We have, Kirsty tells me, 2 spaces left. So if anybody wants to come, there is a little room there. There's a small number of attendees. It's a proper workshop, and it's really hands-on, and I think it's really cool. At the end, you get some notes to take away, so you don't need to keep notes if you don't want to, and you get the key screens that she uses in a pack. So that's all okay. If you want to come to this, just put live in the comments, and Kirsty will reach out to you and get that all sorted for tomorrow. If you can't make it, you can still put live, and when she reaches out, say, I can't make this one, could you keep me posted on the next one? Or if you're watching a recording of this, or if you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple or whatever, then all you need to do is email live, L-I-V-E, to Kirsty, K-I-R-S-T-Y, at flair.co.uk. And that's Flair spelled F-L-A-I-R. So if you do that, you get to learn how to run these things like we do. It's a massive differentiator, and what I would urge you all to experiment with at some point. So, Kirsty, back with the show.
Perfect. Yes. So as we said, we are getting to sort of the content-y section now. So if you do have any questions for Clark, please do put them in the comments and I will bring them up. But Clark, I want to first start talking about what we mean when we say content, because obviously we've got things in the UK, we've got things like the live podcasts, we've got things like LinkedIn posts, you've got things like maybe events, both in person and online. And from your point of view, what sort of content works well with a US audience?
Those podcasts like this is great. I think we've seen basic text posts on LinkedIn be the best at converting for recruiting agencies, converting the hiring managers. No hashtags, no pictures, no video, just like text posts.
Really?
But it has to be great. It can't be, and now with AI, it can't be the standard AI text post that we've seen hundreds, if not thousands of times by now. But that's been the single best converting format that's been across the board. Now, number one, it's ease of creating it. Now, 3 years ago, before AI, or 4 years ago, however long it's been on the scene, that it had a tremendous impact. It still does, but now you have to understand what you're battling against with AI. I think podcasts like this are fantastic because it helps you reach different buyers. Some people are going to resonate more with text posts. Some are going to resonate more with podcasts. Some might resonate more with video. So I think over time, as part of content strategy, if you look at it, say, over the course of a year, it's, could I have text posts out there, have some videos, have a podcast, do a video, podcast, and make that my video and audio format, right? I think it's good to have different mediums that you've recorded on, but I have people that get obsessed with creating video content and do this whole production, and it doesn't really convert. It doesn't really work that well for them. So I think there's like a ease there too. Yeah.
An interesting point on that one, really, just to hark back to what we're talking about here. See, one of the reasons we like video is that it's obviously not AI. Would I look like this if it was AI generated? No, I'd look like Brad Pitt back in the 90s. But anyway, but this is obviously us. It's authentic and it's us. And there's a level of personality that you can't get in written work. So that's what we get from this. But we strip off the audio and it goes on to our podcast on Spotify. Also, for some of the really good ones that we have where we've got a lot of interaction, Kirsty takes the transcript and turns it into a post for our LinkedIn newsletter. In fact, there's one going out this week, I think, isn't there, Kirsty? Mm-hmm. Right. So you can repurpose content and give it in the format that you think your audience is going to be best suited, whether it's written, whether it's video, or whether it's audio. But I wanted to ask a question on this, which is really important. Do we still believe then that content can start conversations? Because it works in the UK. There's no question about that. Does it still work in the US? Is that a definitive yes, if it's the right kind of content?
It's 1,000% yes. And I think the people that are doing outreach only are absolutely or leaving money on the table. I'll put it that way, because there is, especially on LinkedIn is full of lurkers. And one of the things that I hear is like, oh, I don't want to look like my feed. I was like, well, your feed is a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of all the people that are active on LinkedIn every month. I think there's over 300 million monthly active users of 1.15 billion profiles on LinkedIn. And I think that if you post more than once a week, you're in like the top 0.01% of LinkedIn people on LinkedIn in terms of creators. The opportunity is humongous. Right? So if your feed is full of other recruiters posting, just unfollow them. Right? If that, or what, if you don't care to follow, but you're hiring. And for us, recruiters are very active on LinkedIn. So if, for us, podcasts and text and all that is great, right? Because we know agency recruiters are active on LinkedIn. A lot of them pay a lot of money to be active, to be on LinkedIn, right? That's how it works. But then you also think about hiring managers. There's a lot that have 100 connections, 50, 500. They don't have many people on their feed. And so that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's like, if you actually put yourself out there, you might be the only person on that hiring manager's feed that they see that actually is posting content. So the opportunity is there. Now, of course, you want to have the right strategy and have good posts, and what are they actually going to resonate with, right? That's a whole separate conversation. But the opportunity, which is what we're trying to do with cold calls and emails, is just get in front of them. And if they only knew what I could do for them, they would work with me. Well, I mean, that's the LinkedIn content feed for you. And I mean,
ask another question then. Another question.
Interesting point.
That is a very interesting point. I want to build on that. There's a question I need to ask you. So in the UK, what we teach our clients is to have a layered approach. So put stuff out on LinkedIn, people kind of interact with it and like it. So you've self-selected. If you run a show, we invite people to the show because we know who they are. So we invite them to the show. And then some of the people that we invite onto the show, we then ask to come to like a workshop that we run, or all free, so we don't charge for anything, a workshop or a round table where we get someone to come in and talk. So it's a layered approach. And it works very well in the UK, there's no question. So especially if you get an expert on a topic that is of interest to your market, to come and share their knowledge in a kind of an environment like a webinar or just even a Teams call sometimes. Does that work in the States? If I was to go to the States and say, right, I'm going to get an expert in a topic that I know my industry is interested in, and I'm going to invite people to come along and ask this person questions in a Teams call, is that the kind of thing that would get people to actually make themselves known to you and to interact with you?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're a physical therapist recruiter and you want to get more of those clients, or probably in that space, get more candidates, because those are harder to find than clients, and you can interview a bunch of clinic directors and see, and see how, I think the medium is great. Right. I think there's a couple things to think about when you do a podcast, which I've gotten feedback from recruiters, is when they're the interviewer, they don't really get a chance to showcase themselves. So I think almost having like a fireside chat format can kind of help, make sure that even as the host of the podcast, you have the ability to leverage your understanding and all that, have more of a collaborative conversation. So it's not just like an interview with, say, like a clinic director about where they're from, but more like what you're seeing in the market, have more of a back and forth. And I think that's a format to think about a little bit. So it's like, what can kind of showcase you as the expert, which you'll get some of that credibility just from having certain people on there, but being able to, in the podcast, be more collaborative versus just asking a line of questions is just something to think about. And then also just the topics. I think I see recruiters kind of veer off into, I'm going to be talk about being an entrepreneur and like Gary V type of content, but that doesn't really help a hiring manager. So you have to know, you still have to reverse engineer, who is my ideal listener for this audience? Am I trying to go viral and get a ton of downloads, or do I want to resonate with just, say, 10 hiring managers that could be my potential next 10 clients or the next 12 months? And so the medium is great, but also just thinking about what your end goal is and having that in mind. And typically what I see with stuff that is successful for recruiters, you have to get rid of the ego and the numbers and the vanity numbers and just focus strictly on that. You'll get less impression in the views, but
that is really important. It's not really about the numbers, is it? That it really is about the engagement, and also making sure you've got a clear idea what your ideal client looks like in its full glory, so you can differentiate between those people you want to pursue, that you become aware of, and those people that actually, they're not going to be a great client for us. So we're just going to let that relationship go away.
What I would say is, well, for Thanksgiving over in the States, but if my family understands what I do or my podcast at Thanksgiving, I'm doing it all wrong. Like, they should have no idea, like, why are you talking about LinkedIn marketing and recruiters? Because none of them are in the recruiting space. They should be confused when I explain what I do, because only the people that actually should care should know and understand. If anyone in like a family gathering can understand, I've almost failed. In a sense, like if they LinkedIn, they're kind of like LinkedIn recruiting, like what is all that? Good, it's not for you, right? So be very, just own who it's for and know who it's not for, and that's okay.
Well, we had Darren Westall on talking about LinkedIn, a LinkedIn expert in UK, and one of the things he said, which I've done, and it has made a difference. He said, first of all, make sure the people you're connected with on LinkedIn are the people that you can see some purpose with, either as candidates or as clients or as intermediaries who you can introduce you to as people. Delete everybody else. So I've just got rid of 2,000 connections by hand. Whilst watching the football.
That's why we're second degree. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay, Mike.
Out they come, right? Out they come. But also, he said, when you post, make sure you post about the same stuff that's relevant for the audience. And I think LinkedIn now really wants you to post about things which your audience is interested in. And you need to figure that out. You need to understand what that is and then keep it to that. So the days of producing, like you, I found recently that text-only posts are doing better. They do so much better than putting random pictures of me on there, or God forbid AI.
That could be your face, though, Mike.
Yeah, my face. Yeah. No, I mean, AI. I would spruce them.
That's why I don't post selfies either. So
No, well, I don't do anything with it now, and I do the videos, but really, it is about the content, isn't it? That's what it's all about.
I do have a question actually on that, Clark. Does there have to be a US lean to it? So if I'm creating, if I'm talking about a client that I've done really well with, or, subtly, does it have to be a US client that I'm mentioning? If I'm having guests onto a podcast and I'm aiming to have a US focus, do they have to be Americans that I'm interviewing, or can I still interview people from the UK? Do all of my examples that I need to use, do they need to have a US lean to it, or does that not really make a difference?
Yes and no. And here's what I mean by that. And this is, we have a boot camp right now that's a lot of recruiters that are brand new to the space. So what I tell them is that in your first year, you are no matter what you do, there are going to be people that don't work with you because you're brand new to agency recruiting. In your first year, there are people that will only work with you because you're brand new to agency recruiting. So I think understanding where you sit and kind of where you're at is really important. Right? There's people that wouldn't have worked with me 5 years ago because I was new to the LinkedIn consultancy marketing thing. Now they've worked with me 3 or 4 years later, and I had the data to back it up because I've tracked where some of my best clients had come from, and some of them took 4 years to convert. Kind of the same thing. I didn't knock down their door. They came to me when they were ready or they had that trust. And so I say that because you're going to have different types of buyers. And then so just understanding where you sit. And I don't think, number one, you don't want to force it, right? I don't even think you want to like US this and US that. I think you want to really lean into sharing your story. Now you want to have angles, right? If you're a recruiter in, for targeting Florida, you want to say this Miami subcontractor, this Miami general contractor, or this Miami physical, my client, Miami based, physical therapy clinic. If you have it, lean into it and sprinkle it in. But I would say don't force it and make it awkward. Is kind of the general rule of thumb.
Can I ask a question then, which is very practical? Again, based on what you just said there, which is all about content and positioning, right? So, assuming you were doing work on LinkedIn, so you're putting posts out, maybe you've got a show you're doing once a month or whatever. I don't know. You've got some stuff going out on LinkedIn, which is your key messages about you and of interest, yada, yada, yada. And obviously that should generate some inbound. But can you back that up, but just by ringing someone up? Seeing if someone's looked at your LinkedIn profile and then ring them up. Absolutely. Is that okay in the States? Can you do that? Is that normal?
Encouraged, even. Now, whether they answer or not, or check their voicemail is another question. And that is definitely going to be more industry dependent. You just got to know the space, you just got to know the pond you're in. Right? Is really like if I'm dealing with, SaaS, go-to-market engineers, founders, less on the phone, a lot more online. If I'm, dealing with construction and owner and VPs and all that, maybe a construction, yeah, you're probably more apt to pick up the phone or at least check their voicemail, right? So you have to know the space that you're in, and the calls can definitely still work. And I'm very pro calls. Yeah, try it. Figure it out for yourself. Figure it out, and then you can leave. And I would definitely encourage leaving voicemails and be like, "Hey, I also reached out to you on LinkedIn," because you want your LinkedIn to be so polished and relevant for them. You want to drive traffic to it, right? And you want them to see it. Yeah.
I've got some more practical questions. Some not yes nos necessarily, but kind of simple, quick fire questions. In the UK, it's for certain types of people a video message, right? LinkedIn. Not video message on LinkedIn necessarily, but unless you're connected with them, but a LinkedIn video message or a message email video message. Is that kind of work? Do people buy into that, or is that not for the American market?
It can all work. Voice memos. I love voice memos. Videos are good, although sometimes I just don't like the selfie mode because it reminds me of how much I haven't gone to the gym the last few years. So I lean into a lot of voice memos, which is fantastic. It's less the medium and more the content of the message. Right. So what are you saying in there? When they see the video, they look at your profile, they look at the content. Does the holistic picture scream someone that they want to interact with and that they should want to learn from, work with, and that they could get benefit from talking to, right? Versus if you do a video, be like, hey, let me know how I can help you to hire. What's like, great. I've got that pitch from 50 people this week alone, right? Mm-hmm. But is it actually trying to start a conversation to be curious and discover where they're at? Or is it just all about the person sending the message? And a lot of recruiter outreach is all about them and not about the person on the other side.
One last question on that then, and I know Kirsty's keen to get on to other things, but one last question. One of the things that doesn't go down well in the UK is the connect and pitch slap. So you connect on LinkedIn, next thing you do, you get a message saying, hey, we do this, can we help you? It's like, really, that's, what do you like?
English people are skeptical.
In the States, is that pitch slap
the same? Absolutely the same. Absolutely the same. The only way it really works is if you've done research on a potential problem. Like if I see that they've reposted an estimator role for 5 months and had no applicants, I might say, hey, I reached out because I saw this estimator role is open and reposted. Usually that's a sign that the company's like struggling to find someone. I see you're in Dallas. I've just placed 5 estimators this year in the Dallas area. I have about 50 more that I've spoken with or that are like really qualified. Is it worth the conversation? Like that's a pitch I would do, because the problem looks like it's pretty stated pretty clearly. And from your experience, you can infer that there's an issue there, right? But you're coming to the table with an actual solution. I wouldn't do a fake NPC or anything else like that. But like, if you've legitimately solved problems for them in that area, like similar, you can lead with that. But everything else is going to be, it's kind of, everyone's seen it.
Just picking up on that as well with NPCs, is that a thing in the States, or is that, again, that those days have gone?
It's definitely a thing. It's just how you approach it. Is it a real NPC? Are you sending 30 at a time? I think are you trying to NPC a CEO? Well, good luck, right? I mean, I think if you look at individual, if it's a skill set that's always in demand by people in your space, then yes. And if there's an actual match there, I think it's never been easier with databases and now MCPs. I know it's so confusing. There's MCPs and NPCs, but connecting a database to AI and then open jobs. Hey, look at the open jobs for this company and see who I have in my database that matches those open jobs. Like, you can do that now. There's softwares that can do that. You can, connect it for yourself as well, right? And I think if it's real and it's legit and it can actually meet the need, then yes, absolutely. The other take on the NPC that I have, which I don't see that as much, is I think the recruiter themselves is the NPC. Instead of getting obsessed with one perfect candidate, because what happens? Then you're navigating, okay, well, this person isn't quite the fit, because the NPC you present is almost never the person that gets the job, in my experience, either myself or working with other people. But what are they really buying into? That recruiter has established themselves as someone that understands their space, their lane, and can work a recruiting process to get them the right fit. And so there's a lot more of that going on, as well as the recruiter themselves is not the most placeable candidate, but they're the solution. Right? And I think people get so worked into the tactical piece of the perfect candidate that really it's just a business, it's a conversation starter. You want to just show that you know enough of the space, you have the ability to get the candidates that they need, and have like a process and idea of how to make the match.
Which again brings us back to where we started with the focus. If you focused in the space, again, that reinforces that this is my space, this is a candidate, or whatever, however you want to pitch it. We have others like this, but hey, this is my thing, come to me. So I think that's certainly in the States, that's going to be a big thing. If you're going to try and break into that market, focus down and dig in, and it opens all sorts of opportunities for you.
Perfect. Okay, so unfortunately we have come towards the end of the show now, so if you do have any questions for Clark, please do pop them in the comments right at the end. Now in a second I'm going to come to Clark for his top tip, but before then, Michael, I think we're going to talk about our next show in 2 weeks.
We are, and this isn't confusing at all. We have a Luke Willcox as opposed to a Clark Willcox. It's not confusing at all.
Very confusing for me.
He's going to be talking about a very interesting topic, and he's engaged me in this, and I'm interested myself. And he's using technology for that. So, spoiler alert, it's a strategy wrapped around tech, and it's designed to get your vacancies ahead of your competitors. I'm really, really interested in it, and I think if that's a thing for you, I think you should come. I would say that, wouldn't I? But I do think it's going to be an interesting program.
We are very much looking forward to it.
And that's live now, isn't it, Kirsty?
It is live now. I'll put a link in the comments before we finish up. But Clark, you've given us a lot today. I think the biggest things I've taken away are that focus element, that kind of understanding exactly what you want to work on and being able to spread the word is great. There is the nuance of the US versus UK. There are ever so slight differences, and part of that focus is understanding those differences, because they are not only just within US versus UK, they're also based on the coast. They're also perhaps based on the industry that you're working in or the level that you're working at. So there are different things that you need to understand. It's the same as any role in that sense. But from your point of view, if somebody wanted to start getting clients in the US tomorrow, they really like the idea of it, what is the first thing that you think that they should do in order to help them in that process?
Look at your LinkedIn profile and do an audit. And so from the headline, from the first 5 to 8 words as you send a connection request, people are only going to see the first 5 to 8 words. So if you have a focus or a niche or whatever that looks like, lead with that in the first part of your headline, and then put founder, recruiter at whatever agency you're at the end, right? Because no one really knows the difference except for a few select agencies, and that's not always a good thing. So focus on your niche in the first, in the headline, and really make it really clear, and really focus on those first 5 to 8 words. And then in your about section, a lot of people put their story, and some people maybe have their niche and all that on there, but a lot of people, what they don't have is the results that they have. So if you have results placing physical therapists or estimators or superintendents or staff accountants, whatever the types of roles and kind of the company's, specs, if you will, that you've already helped, that you want more of, put those on there. Put your results on your back sector. You can look at my LinkedIn profile for myself. You look at the recommendations of clients that we've worked with to kind of study what a lot of those about sections look like and figure out what that should look like for yourself. That is one of the things we've helped people get $30,000 placements, $70,000 placements, like all that just from fixing their profile. Again, it just makes it extremely clear because, again, we all have goldfish memories now, and Americans are probably the worst at it. And so it's like you have to resonate like right away. And the LinkedIn profile is a great way to do that. Really treat that as a landing sales page and not just a resume, a CV, or anything else, right? But really focus on painting the picture for why the hiring manager should talk to you, right? Either the current or potential hiring need.
I love that. The landing sales page. I absolutely love that.
Advice.
Okay, so we have come towards the end of the show now. So Clark, thank you so much for being here. You've added so much value today. If anybody has any further questions or they're watching the recording of this and want to get some clarification from you, is the best thing for them to do to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Connect on LinkedIn, Clark Willcox with 2 L's. In Willcox, which is unusual for some, but yeah, definitely connect on LinkedIn. There's digitalrecruiter.io, but on my LinkedIn, there's you can book a call with me. You can get a bunch of free playbooks and stuff like that on inbound marketing, on AI, sales, automation, all that good stuff. So yeah, that's probably the place to go.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much. I also want to say thank you to everybody who's watched. We have had this final comment that I'm going to bring up from one Paul Griffin, who has said, "Don't forget to wish Big Mike a happy birthday for tomorrow. Is he really 66? He looks older."
Happy birthday, Mike.
He's just jealous. That's what he is.
There's only one present you want tomorrow, I'm assuming, Mike. All right. You got to take it home. You got to bring it's coming home.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, right? Come on then. Come off the fence. England or Argentina tomorrow? Come on. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's England versus Argentina in VAR, right? So you gotta be careful. So they're up against it, but I hope England comes through. Again, my last name's Willcox, right? It's English ancestry through and through.
Well,
so,
you got away with that. You got away with that.
Well
done. Okay, well, thank you very much, Clark. Outstanding that you've been on here.
So much
I know we could have spoken for another hour. We tried to get through as much content as we could and make it as practical as we could. So thank you very much for that. Also, thank you very much, Kirsty, for being the hostess with the most guests.
Very welcome.
And we've got some big news about a new podcast from you fairly soon, haven't we?
We do. Hopefully, I'll get that sorted for the next.
We're looking at that next week, actually, when we go out. Okay. And we wish you all a very wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.